She stood over me, screaming in my face, making me sign divorce papers on the kitchen table, like I was the maid, not her son's wife. But she had no idea who my father really was. Please stay with me as I tell you my story. And please don't forget to support our channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing this with someone who's ever been underestimated. My name is Nia Carter, and I didn't grow up with much, but I had dignity. That morning, I woke up early to make breakfast for Jalen before his flight. He kissed me on the forehead, told me he loved me, and said his mother would be stopping by later to drop off some old family photos. I smiled, poured myself coffee, and didn't think much of it, until I opened the door and found Eloise Barrington standing there, not with photo albums, but with a thick folder and a look like I'd just spit on her marble porch. She walked past me like she owned the place, heels stabbing the hardwood floor with every step, and dropped the folder on the kitchen table without even saying good morning. "Sign it," she said. I blinked. "Sign what?" She shoved the folder toward me. "The divorce papers. And don't play dumb. I've had them drafted for weeks." I stood frozen. My heart didn't even beat. I swear it just waited. "Where's Jalen?" "He's not here," she snapped. "Because he's weak. And I'm not about to let him throw his life away for a gold-digging mistake like you." She stepped closer. Her voice rose with every word until she was practically shouting. "You think marrying my son made you family? You're nothing. You're a phase. And I am ending it today." I wanted to say something. Anything. But I was stuck. Not scared, angry. Humiliated. The kind of humiliation that gets burned into your bone. She snatched a pen off the counter, uncapped it, and held it out to me like she was offering poison. "Sign it, Nia. Or I swear, I'll make sure the whole city hears exactly how you fooled him." So I signed. Not because I gave up, but because I knew something she didn't. She thought I was alone, just another girl trying to climb up out of nothing. But I knew the name on my birth certificate wasn't the whole story. I had my mother's last name, sure. But she never told me who my father was. Not until the week before she died, when she left me a note I hadn't dared open. Until now. And let me tell you something. That name? It changed everything. She called me a mistake. Not once. Not in private. But in front of people. Important people. People in suits and silk scarves and wine-stained smiles. It was a sunny Sunday afternoon, the kind where Atlanta air feels like thick velvet, and the Barrington estate looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. I had spent the whole morning helping Eloise's house staff prepare for her brunch. I cut lemons for the tea, arranged gardenias in antique vases, even ironed napkins while she barked instructions behind me like I was the help. Jalen had told me to be patient. "She'll come around," he said. "She's just protective." But protective felt like too small a word for what Eloise. She didn't ignore me, she watched me. Like I was a thread out of place in her flawless fabric. I wore a pale blue dress that day, the one Jalen said made me look like old money, whatever that meant. I thought I looked elegant, but when Eloise caught sight of me as I brought out the deviled eggs, her eyes narrowed like I'd worn white to someone else's wedding. The guests arrived in waves, mostly older couples from Savannah and Charleston, all of them dripping with family money and sharp smile. I smiled too, as politely as I could. But I noticed none of them looked at me when they asked Eloise questions. She would gesture vaguely in my direction and say, "She's helping out today." Or worse, "She's with Jalen." When it finally happened, it was over dessert. Someone mentioned engagement announcements in the local papers, and Eloise laughed that polished, tight-lipped laugh she always used to cover venom. "Oh, please," she said, sipping from her crystal flute. "This girl, she won't last. My son makes mistakes, but we don't let them become permanent." My hand jerked slightly, and a spoon clinked against the china. No one said anything, but every eye flicked toward me, just for a second. Long enough. Eloise didn't apologize. She didn't even glance at me. She continued as if I weren't sitting 6 feet away. "It's unfortunate, really. She means well. But meaning well doesn't buy you class. You're either born with it, or you fake it until someone notices." The room went quiet. Not out of protest. Out of complicity. I stood up slowly, walked out of the sunroom, down the marble hall, and into the guest bathroom where I locked the door and stared at my reflection. I didn't cry. Not then. Not ever. Not in front of her. But I did whisper to myself, "You're not a mistake." It didn't sound convincing at the time. Jalen found me an hour later, eyes wide, asking if I was okay. He claimed he hadn't heard what his mother said, that he was in the garden, distracted, talking to someone. I wanted to scream, "Then why do you look so guilty?" But I didn't. I just smiled, told him I was fine, and walked out beside him like everything was normal. But something had changed. Not just in me. In the air between us. He didn't hold my hand that evening. Didn't kiss me goodnight. Just stared at his phone, then rolled over. That was the first night I didn't sleep beside a man. I slept beside a silence I couldn't name. And deep down, I started to understand. Maybe the mistake wasn't me. Maybe it was thinking I'd ever be enough for a family that never wanted me in it to begin with. The morning she came back with the papers, I already knew something was off. It wasn't the knock on the door. I was used to Eloise showing up unannounced, acting like the house was hers. Technically, it wasn't. Jalen and I had bought it together after the wedding, or so I thought. But that morning, the knock wasn't casual. It was aggressive, rhythmic, final. I opened the door in a robe and slippers. Her eyes swept over me like I was dressed in rags. She didn't say hello. She didn't come in slowly. She marched past me, heels tapping against hardwood, holding a folder so thick it looked like a legal textbook. She dropped it on the table. Then she smiled, just enough to make it worse. "You might want to sit down for this," she said, though her tone made it clear it wasn't a suggestion. I stayed standing. "I've given you too much time," she continued, pulling out pages and spreading them like cards. "You and your lies, your sob story, your desperate little climb into this family. But it ends today. Jalen's not here. He doesn't need to be. This isn't about him anymore." I glanced at the document. Then my stomach turned. Prenup. My name was already there. Not a blank line waiting for my signature, already written in ink. And dated. Months before our wedding. I looked at her. "What is this?" "What it looks like," she snapped. "A prenup. You signed it. It's legally binding." "I never signed this." "You did. Or someone did for you," she said with a shrug, like forging my name was a clerical detail. "And guess what? You get nothing. Not a dollar. Not a car. Not even the wedding china." She slid the divorce papers across the table, like she was dealing cards in a bad game of poker. "You can go quietly, or you can embarrass yourself. Your choice." Jalen wasn't answering his phone. I knew he was in Chicago for a business trip. His itinerary was printed on our fridge. But now it felt less like a coincidence and more like a strategy. Keep him away. Let Eloise do the dirty work. I stared down at the papers. Her eyes were on me like a hawk, waiting to tear into the first sign of resistance. I didn't give her one. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. She wanted to see pain. But all she got was stillness. I signed. Then I pushed the papers back and smiled. "Anything else?" I asked. That shook her. She blinked, just for a second. A crack in the armor. I turned and walked to the sink, washed my hands like it was any other morning. What she didn't know, what she never even thought to ask, was what my mother had left me. Not jewelry, not property, a truth, a name. And names, when whispered to the right people, can open vaults. She thought she'd won. But that signature was just my beginning. The day I moved back into my apartment, it didn't feel like home. The walls still held the scent of lavender from old candles, and the floors creaked in the same familiar places, but everything felt tighter, smaller, like I had shrunk while the room stayed the same. My suitcase sat half unpacked in the corner, and my engagement photo with Jalen lay face down on the counter, glass cracked across our smiles. I didn't bother picking it up. I wasn't angry anymore, not even sad. I felt like I'd stepped out of a fog and was finally breathing real air. Alone, yes, but clear. I spent the next few hours in silence. No calls, no texts. Not even background music. Just the hum of the fridge and the ticking wall clock. Around midnight, I found myself digging through an old cedar box tucked beneath the bed, something I hadn't opened in years. It used to belong to my mother. Inside were her keepsakes, a faded scarf that still smelled like her perfume, a locket I wore to her funeral, and a stack of envelopes tied together with red yarn. Most were addressed to old friends, some to lawyers, some never opened. One had my name on it. The envelope was yellowed at the edges, thin but sealed tight. On the back, in her soft cursive, it said, "For Nia, when you're ready." I broke the seal and pulled out a single photograph and a folded piece of paper. The picture stopped my breath. Me, as a baby, chubby cheeks, curled fists, sitting on the lap of a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, dark-skinned, sharply dressed in a navy wool coat. His hand rested gently on my back. He looked directly at the camera, eyes steady. There was something familiar in the way he held me, like I belonged there. The note was short. "If anything happens to me, find him. His name is Langston Remy. He wanted to protect you, Nia, but the world wouldn't let him. He's not what they said. You need to know." I read it twice. Then again. Langston Remy. I said it out loud just to hear how it sounded. The name echoed through the room, heavy and precise. I tried to remember if I'd ever heard it before. It felt distant, like something whispered in another lifetime. For years, I believed my father was gone, some vague shadow who disappeared before I could form memories. My mother never offered details, just tight-lipped phrases like, "It's better this way," or "Some people can't stay." I figured he had done something terrible, left us, or worse. But now I had a name, a face, and the weight of a truth I hadn't expected. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the table with the photo and the note spread in front of me, replaying every moment of my life with new context. My mother had known something I didn't, and whatever reason she'd kept it from me, it wasn't fear. It was timing. She must have known this moment would come. The moment I'd have nothing left but my name. And maybe, just maybe, that name wasn't the one people thought it was. The first time I heard his voice, it was through an intercom. I was standing in front of a tall iron gate in Brooklyn Heights, where the townhouse looked more like a museum than a residence. Stone lions flanking the stairs, ivy wrapping itself around the brick like it had lived there longer than the people inside. I buzzed once, my finger trembling. The speaker crackled, and then came a voice, measured, deep, cautious. "Who is it?" I didn't know how to answer at first. I could have said my name, but that didn't feel like enough. So I said the only thing I thought might reach him. "I think I'm your daughter." Silence. Not a pause. A full stop. The kind that stretches long enough to make you doubt whether you said it out loud or just imagined it. Then the gate clicked open. I stepped inside and climbed the steps, heart pounding hard enough I could hear it in my ears. The door opened before I knocked. He looked older than the photo, gray at the temples, deeper lines around his mouth, but his eyes were exactly the same. That steady gaze I'd seen in the picture. Only now it wasn't distant. It was locked on me like he was trying to memorize my face before it disappeared again. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Your mother's name was Janelle." It wasn't a question. I nodded. "She told you." "She left a letter," I said quietly. He stepped aside to let me in. The inside of his home felt like something out of a private world, grand but quiet. Every shelf, every chair, every book in place. Not like someone who flaunted wealth, like someone who hid behind it. We sat in a study filled with photographs I didn't recognize. Most were business gatherings, a few awards on the wall. No family photos. Not one of me. He poured tea. Not because it was polite, but because it gave him something to do with his hands. "I wanted to see you," he said, almost to himself. "All those years." I tried. "Then why didn't you?" His jaw tightened. "Because they wouldn't let me." I didn't speak. I wanted him to say it without prompting. And he did. "They threatened me. My position. My reputation." "Your mother," he trailed off, blinking hard. "They offered her money to disappear. And when she didn't, they tried to destroy her another way." "They." His eyes met mine. Eloise Barrington was one of them. It didn't shock me. It should have, maybe. But it didn't. The pieces were falling too easily into place now. "She knew who I was?" "She knew who I was," he said. "She made sure your mother suffered for it. I stayed away to protect you both. I shouldn't have. I was a coward." "No," I said quietly. "You were cornered. There's a difference." He looked at me then, not as a stranger, but as something long lost. "I can help you," he said. "Not just with money. With access. With influence. If you want to make her regret every move, I'll open every door." I didn't answer right away. I wasn't there for revenge. Not exactly. I was there to become someone she couldn't silence. And in that moment, I realized something. I had never been just Nia Carter. My last name carried weight. It was Remy. And that name didn't bow. It built empires. I didn't come back to be loud. I came back to be noticed without ever having to raise my voice. There's a kind of precision that only silence can deliver. The kind that doesn't knock on the door, but changes the locks. I started with a name no one connected to me. Something neutral. Clean. Then I formed an LLC through a shell corporation out of Delaware, just like the Barringtons did for decades. She taught me that. I was just paying attention when she thought I was too simple to understand. My father never handed me anything. What he gave me were introductions, names, emails, phone numbers, lunch meeting. I never used his name, never dropped it in a room, never rode on the weight of his legacy. I earned trust by showing up with a plan and never blinking. The first acquisition was small, a failing event company based in Midtown. They didn't know they were being bought by a woman who used to fold napkins at their galas. I overhauled the business, flipped it into a brand consultancy, and then used that to acquire a controlling stake in the Barrington Foundation's annual Women of Heritage Gala. It was Eloise's pride and joy. She hosted it every spring, standing in front of camera crews, preaching about legacy and community like she hadn't shoved me out of her. She called it her life's work. So I shut it down, quietly, legally, with a board vote she couldn't override. I sent out letters to all the donors announcing a strategic restructuring and rebranded the entire foundation under a new mission. One that didn't include her name anywhere. She found out through the news, just like everyone else. Then came the property. I remembered the lot next door to the Barrington estate, abandoned for years due to zoning issues and noise complaints. I bought it under an anonymous subsidiary and cleared the permits with the city after hiring a top-tier legal team. Within weeks, construction started on a rooftop lounge, complete with a DJ booth that faced her garden wall. She filed 3 complaints with the city. Each one was dismissed. By the time the club opened, her dinner parties had stopped altogether. Guests couldn't hear themselves talk over the bass. The night of our launch, I stood on the balcony, champagne in hand, watching as her curtains snapped shut. A perfect ending to the kind of story she thought she controlled. I wasn't reckless. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. This wasn't revenge. It was inheritance, claimed the way she taught me, with contracts, signatures, and leverage. Her rules. My game. The invitation wasn't just a gesture, it was my statement. And I wanted her to read every word of it like a confession she didn't realize she'd written herself. I had her address memorized, down to the last digit. Of course I did. I'd lived under her roof, eaten at her table, signed my name on her documents. This time, it was my turn to deliver something she couldn't ignore. Her invitation was the first one I sent. I had it printed on thick ivory cardstock, trimmed in gold, sealed with a wax crest embossed with NR Holdings. A company name she wouldn't recognize but would pretend to know the moment she saw it. I didn't need to explain who we were. I knew her curiosity wouldn't let her sit still. I was counting on it. I used a luxury private courier service, uniformed, silent, precise. He handed it off to her butler just after sunrise. No words, just the envelope. I pictured her in her silk robe, standing near the window with her usual black coffee, pretending not to be eager as she opened it. Inside, the message was simple. You are cordially invited to a private gala celebrating powerful women reshaping legacy and leadership. Hosted by NR Holdings. Location and time enclosed. Formal attire required. Presented by Remy. I didn't sign it with my full name. Not yet. I sent 9 more. Every recipient had history with her. Some tangled in decades of forced friendship, others carrying quiet scars from the way she dismissed or humiliated them. Women who'd once called her Ellie at brunches, or endured her sharp-edged compliments in boardrooms. They were my audience, but she was the show. The Grand Ivy Theater gleamed that night like it had been waiting for this moment. Gold lighting, fresh orchids, champagne flowing through glass like silk. I kept everything clean, high-end, nothing flashy. The kind of taste she respected. Familiar enough to disarm her. I watched her arrive through the monitor in the control room upstairs. She wore black velvet, pearls thick around her neck like armor. 2 women flanked her like loyal shadows, smiling with the desperation of people who live too close to someone powerful. She posed for cameras with the same practiced tilt of the head I remembered from family portraits she insisted on. She didn't notice her seat card said honorary guest. I knew she wouldn't. She never read the fine print. When the lights dimmed, the room hushed the way ballrooms do when wealth is about to speak. I took the stage through the side entrance, unseen. I didn't need to be in front of them. I just needed my voice. Then the screen lit up. A photo of her appeared. Then another. And another. Her quotes. Her emails. Her actions documented, time-stamped, unimpeachable. Not rage, not slander. Just truth. And my voice over all of it, saying the one thing I'd waited years to say. Some women build legacies. Others burn them to keep warm. Tonight, we tell the difference. And from where I stood, I saw her body stiffen. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. She stood up and walked out. Fast. Alone. She came just after midnight. No warning. No assistant. No driver waiting outside. Just her, Eloise Barrington, dressed in a coat too formal for this time of night, standing in the lobby of my office building like she'd accidentally wandered into enemy territory. The security guard called up, asking if I was expecting a Mrs. Barrington. I told him to let her in. I didn't pace. I didn't adjust my hair. I didn't rehearse a single line. I just waited, exactly how I knew she expected not to find me, calm, in control, behind the same desk I'd built from scratch. She pushed open the door like it owed her something. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on the glass walls, the view of the skyline behind me, the soft amber lights that gave everything a golden sheen. She didn't sit. She didn't speak. She just stood there, watching me like she couldn't figure out how I'd done it. Then she broke. You didn't have to humiliate me. That was her opening line. No apology. No ownership. Just a complaint about optics. I said nothing. I made mistakes, she added, her voice already shaking. But that wasn't fair. I still didn't speak. I wanted her to feel the silence stretch. Wanted her to fill it. She stepped closer, trying to regain her poise, but her movements were too quick, too forced. You don't know what it's like being responsible for a name. For a legacy. I did what I had to do. I leaned back slightly. You forged my signature. That made her flinch. I was trying to protect Jalen, she said, softer now. He's not strong. You know that. And just like that, she shifted the blame. Not to me. To her own son. He doesn't think for himself. He listens to whatever sounds good in the moment. He would have given you everything just to prove he wasn't like me. I let her speak. She talked for 23 minutes. I counted. The tears started around my nude date. The excuses came before that. Then the gaslighting. The desperation. Somewhere between minutes 16 and 17, she reached out, touched the edge of my desk like it grounded her, and said, "I didn't know who you were." Not really. If I had. I finally stood up. You mean if I had money? Her silence said more than her tears ever could. I reached into the drawer and placed a small device on the desk, a sleek, black remote. One button. I clicked it. The screen behind me came to life, showing her standing in my office, hands clasped like a student caught cheating. "There are cameras," I said. 3 of them. One by the door, one on the shelf, one above the screen. She turned slowly toward the wall, locating them with her eyes. She didn't deny it. She didn't beg me to erase it. She just whispered, "You wouldn't." I slid a flash drive across the desk. "That's for you. The raw footage." She didn't touch it. "You're going viral by sunrise," I said. She left without her coat. It wasn't just a house. It was her monument, her kingdom, the stage where she held court in $1,000 shoes and dished out judgment with every bite of lemon tart. Now it belonged to me. I didn't tell anyone I was the buyer. The auction listing never used the Barrington name. Just a parcel number, a square footage count, and a vague motivated seller tag. Still, I recognized every line of the blueprint. The walk-in wine cellar. The marble staircase that spiraled like a ribbon. The garden she once said was too elegant for children. I let the real estate agent talk through the tour like it was any other property. He described the potential of the space like it hadn't already seen decades of practiced cruelty. I nodded, pretended to take notes, and said I'd be paying in full. In cash. Through a holding company. No one questioned it. After the transfer went through, the first thing I did wasn't redecorate. It wasn't even change the locks. It was rip the front gate out of the ground. The iron bars, painted black with a gold bee at the center, had always felt like a warning more than a welcome. I called in a crew at dawn, told them I wanted it gone before lunch. When they asked what to replace it with, I said, "Nothing. Let the road lead straight in. Let the world see what happens when a woman builds her own door." By sunset, the gate lay in pieces on the front lawn. I stepped through what used to be the entryway and took my time walking the halls. The silence inside felt different now, less hollow, more clean. The walls no longer whispered judgment. The chandeliers no longer sparkled just for show. I wandered into the kitchen without turning on the lights. It looked the same. Cabinets polished. Counters wiped. The same long table where she'd once screamed at me to sign papers like I was her maid and not her daughter-in-law. I slipped off my shoes. The tiles were cold under my feet, but grounding. Real. My toes brushed the same space where my hands once shook holding a pen I didn't want. Now I stood taller. Not with revenge, but with presence. I walked across that floor slowly without flinching. And when I reached the window that overlooked the garden, I paused. The moon cast soft light over the hedges she trimmed with obsessive precision. I could have torn them all out, replaced the whole yard with wildflowers. But I didn't. Some victories don't need fireworks. Just footsteps. And a door left wide open. The envelope arrived with no ceremony. No name on the front. Just a cold white rectangle tucked among reports and briefings on my desk. My assistant didn't recognize it. I did. I knew the weight of her silence. I opened it slowly. Not out of fear, out of clarity. I needed to see it for what it was. Inside was one page. No greeting. No apology. Just that tone she always used when she wanted to wound without using profanity. "You will always be the girl who didn't belong." That was her last word to me. She could have said sorry. Could have said she was wrong. But even now, when everything she built had crumbled, she clung to the same lie. That I was never enough. I didn't cry. I had cried long ago, when no one could see. In guest bathrooms and empty closets. But not now. Not anymore. I had it framed in a black wooden border and hung it on my office wall. Just beside the page she once forced me to sign, hand trembling, pride swallowed. Together, they belonged there. Side by side. One a dismissal. The other a start. Jalen called twice. I watched his name flicker across the screen. Once with hesitation. Once with desperation. I let it ring both times. There was nothing left to say. He had chosen silence when I needed him to speak. Now, I had no use for words from the man who let me be erased. I built my life with the parts they broke. Every bruised moment, every slammed door, every time they made me feel like I was temporary, I turned it into something permanent. My team, young, brilliant, loud when they needed to be and deadly quiet when it mattered, walked into my office every day like they belonged. Because they did. Because I made sure of it. And me? I didn't feel like someone who'd won. I felt like someone who had survived, and then refused to stop there. From the window, the city shimmered below. I stood in the same heels I once couldn't afford, wearing the name they didn't want me to have. I don't smile often, but that day I did. Not because it was over, but because I had finally become the woman they never imagined I could be.